I want a group of people who are not ideologically captured by either side. I am tired of the extremes and the extremists who dominate the debate. They have the megaphone. I consider myself an old school liberal. You have to make that distinction now because, you know, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get triggered by the word. There's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him. They certainly are those. And then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy than stuff that strikes them as aggressively anti-common sense.
Bill Maher just sat down for a no-holds-barred chat with Joe Scarborough on MSNBC, and let's just say, the trolling kicked off faster than a Twitter meltdown. In true Maher fashion, one of the few remaining voices of reason on the left stared Scarborough down and torched MSNBC and the entire woke brigade for completely losing the plot. The aftermath. Let's call it a 7.5 on the triggered Richter scale. Welcome to the channel where we cut through woke chaos with razor-sharp commentary. If you're here for truth bombs, unapologetic satire, and fearless takedowns, hit that subscribe button and strap in.
No misinformation. There's some disinformation from the left, but comparing it to what Donald Trump spews out every day, every week, comparing it to what Elon Musk is spewing out, unfortunately, on X, there's no...
You were like, Bill, how can you, Mr. False Equivalency? Like, no, Joe, come on. I thought you were Joe Scarborough. There's crazy on both sides.
The conversation wasted no time diving into the receipts. Bill Maher threw it back to a previous clash where he openly trolled Joe Scarborough for claiming the left doesn't push disinformation. Yep, Scarborough actually tried to paint the left as the untouchable gatekeepers of truth, and Maher wasn't letting that slide. With his signature smirk and a few precision jabs, Maher dismantled that fantasy. He pointed out the glaring reality. The left, yes, including MSNBC, has absolutely peddled its own share of misinformation. He used the COVID pandemic as Exhibit A, shifting narratives, silenced dissent, and science that often felt more like political theater than medicine. But Maher didn't stop at the headlines. He called out the smug culture of censorship and moral superiority that fueled it all. It was sharp. It was bold. And Scarborough, he looked like he'd just taken a bite out of a lemon.
I changed, you know, people do. Or have things changed, and it's mostly things. The left wasn't as crazy under Bush and Obama. They just weren't. And I was not going to hold my tongue.
Then came the moment every progressive troll was waiting for. Maher addressed the classic accusation that he's the one who changed. But true to form, he fired back without flinching. I haven't changed. The left has lost its mind. And honestly, he's got a point. There was a time when liberalism meant free speech, critical thinking, and a healthy distrust of authority. Values Bill Maher didn't just support, he embodied. But today's left, it's morphed into something far more rigid, theatrical, and flat-out intolerant. Less open dialogue, more purity tests. Less debate, more cancellation. And Maher's not afraid to say the quiet part out loud.
College kids marching for Hamas? Don't tell me there hasn't been a change.
Right.
And the victim culture, the cancel culture.
I will say this, though. As far, listen, I agree. There's been a change on the left.
What once aimed to be a movement for progress has now devolved into a contest of who can be the most offended. Maher didn't mince words. He called out how today's left is fixated on purity tests, identity politics, and silencing dissent, even within its own ranks. Disagreement used to be a cornerstone of democracy. Now, it's a cancellation trigger. Open debate has been replaced with rigid conformity, nuance is punished, and even lifelong liberals like Maher are branded as heretics for daring to think independently.
I consider myself an old school liberal. You have to make that distinction now because, you know, the word woke, which started out as a good thing, being alert to injustice, and a lot of people get triggered by the word.
I remember when woke meant something powerful, standing up for equity, equality, and justice. It was a unifying call to action, not a divisive buzzword. Back then, we rallied behind it with purpose and clarity. But today, the term has been hijacked, twisted by parts of the far left into a tool for control and performative outrage. That's what Maher is pushing back against. He's not anti-justice, he's anti-moral posturing. He's calling out how language and virtue have been weaponized to silence debate. Because when woke becomes a parody of itself, real issues get drowned in the noise.
Now has to answer for, or for people have just used the word to ascribe a number of extreme things on the left.
Maher's message was crystal clear. Liberalism didn't used to eat its own. But somewhere along the way, the left stopped being liberal. And that's when it all started to unravel. Media outlets like MSNBC aren't just along for the ride. They're driving the bus. Instead of challenging groupthink or fostering honest debate, they amplify the loudest, most radical voices and repackage them as mainstream. Rather than inform, they curate. Dissent, even from within, is silenced, mocked, or ignored. The goal isn't truth anymore, it's obedience. And in the process, they've alienated millions of Americans who aren't extremists. They just want real journalism, balanced, honest, and free from ideological sermons dressed up as reporting. As Maher bluntly put it, that, not voter suppression, not disinfo, is why Democrats keep losing elections.
Kamala's big, I think, challenge here to win over the undecided voters is to convince them that she's not part of what they suspect she might be, sort of a stealth version of the worst excesses of the left.
Interestingly, Kamala Harris never really distanced herself from the excesses of the far left. Instead, she became one of its loudest champions, embracing controversy rather than tempering it. Rather than serving as a voice of balance or moderation, she leaned into the chaos, backing policies like allowing biological men to compete in women's sports and use women's bathrooms, decisions that sparked backlash across the political spectrum. Her unwavering support for these and other woke initiatives didn't just alienate conservatives. It confused moderates and unsettled even some liberals. When the country needed unity, leadership, and common-sense solutions, Harris delivered virtue signals and identity politics. And when it came to real crisis, rising crime, inflation, border security, her responses were vague, performative, or completely absent. At a time when Americans were desperate for clarity, Harris offered ideology. That's not leadership. That's pandering. And the consequences were felt coast to coast.
There's a coalition of Trump voters, people who really like him. They certainly are those. And then there's people who don't necessarily like him that much, but they still think he's less crazy than stuff that strikes them as aggressively anti-common sense.
Maher's right. Not everyone loved Trump's personality. But when it came to policy and leadership, he was the more grounded of the two. His agenda was clear: economic strength, national security, border control, and energy independence. Whether you supported him or not, you knew exactly where he stood. And for millions of Americans, that kind of clarity and conviction wasn't just refreshing, it was decisive. That's why he didn't just win. He won big.
Just want her to say, look, I get this about the blue team, and it's on my to-do.
While Kamala Harris served up platitudes and ambiguity, Trump delivered action. From historic tax cuts to sweeping deregulation and groundbreaking Middle East peace deals, his record didn't need spin. It spoke for itself. He didn't pander, he performed. He didn't tiptoe around issues. He confronted them head-on. Even critics acknowledged one thing: he was consistent and unapologetically pro-America. In stark contrast, Biden stumbled, both rhetorically and strategically, surrounding himself with activists instead of problem solvers. Maher, like many others, saw the difference. When the noise faded, Trump stood on firmer ground, and voters remembered when it counted. Meanwhile, the media? Still bent on defending Kamala Harris at all costs. Just watch as Joe Scarborough scrambles to shield the former VP from the fallout.
Easy to say. Yeah, I said that in 2019. I was in a competitive thing. Now, she did say, I think she said this was the law under Trump, too. He didn't change it. But it's very easy to say, I don't believe that anymore. And on that issue, she should. I wanted to ask you.
You saw it. Scarborough couldn't resist dragging Trump into the conversation, subtly trying to pin Kamala Harris' failures on the former president. That's exactly the kind of media spin Bill Maher's been torching for years. Legacy media just can't help themselves. A Democrat's approval ratings collapse. Blame Trump. A policy tanks. Trump again. Kamala Harris flounders. Somehow, still Trump's fault. It's a lazy, tired blame game, and it's why public trust in mainstream media is in free fall. Instead of holding Democrats accountable for their own missteps, outlets like MSNBC contort the narrative to make Trump the scapegoat, even when he's not in power. It's not just intellectually dishonest, it's downright insulting to the audience. Maher gets it. When the media refuses to call out their own side, they don't just fail journalism, they cripple progress. Deflecting blame onto Trump doesn't solve Harris' problems. Because here's the truth. Kamala's issues are Kamala's doing. No amount of finger-pointing will fix that.
I want a group of people who are not ideologically captured by either side. I am tired of the extremes and the extremists who dominate the debate. They have the megaphone.